Well, with that, Max, why don't we call this meeting to order? It's 1:01 and happy to do a roll call.
Certainly. Chair Scott McCallum is noted as present. Nadira Broom,
Present.
Lillian Goodman. I know she's here. Dr. Labram,
Present.
Stephanie McGarry,
Present.
Cassie Trosper-Coiner.
Present.
And Mr. Chair, we have a quorum. The meeting could go forward.
Wonderful. Thank you, Max. And for those of you that may be wondering, I thought we elected Nadira. You did, we did, and Nadira and I are co-chairing. We met with Daisha to plan the agenda, and then I'll be facilitating today. But eventually, Nadira is going to take over here. So with that, let's move forward with the approval of the minutes and looking for a motion from one of my fellow commissioners.
So, Mr. Chair, we had a correction to the minutes that was submitted. On page 4, paragraph 2, Nadira submitted one correction under new business, statewide customer service policy, changing Commissioner Cassie Prosper to Commissioner Nadira Broom as the person who asked the question.
Great. Are there any other corrections?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. With that in mind, is there a motion to accept the minutes?
This is Nadira. I motion to accept.
Okay. We have a motion to accept or approve the minutes. Do I have a second? Thank you, Nadira.
Yes. This is Lillian. Can you hear me?
I sure can. You sound great.
I'll second.
Awesome. Your audio does sound really crisp to me. Perfect.
Oh, good. Okay.
Great. We've got a motion and a second to approve the minutes. With that one correction that was submitted, all in favor, please indicate aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed indicate nay. Hearing none, motion carries. Minutes are passed. Let's go on with audience introductions. Take it away, Max.
Oh, great. So I'd like to start by introducing our Executive Director, Daisha Johnson. Angel Hale, Director of Vocational Rehabilitation Services. Kat Martin is here, Chief Financial and Information Officer. Ron Stewart, Director of the Business Enterprise Program. Jim Portillo, Director of the Orientation and Career Center for the Blind. And Melinda Carlson, Director of Independent Living Services. Is Melinda here?
No, Melinda has a state independent living council this
Right.
afternoon, is not able to join us.
I apologize. So we're also joined by Clay France, the agency's internal auditor, and Sherry Lauer, who's the client agency human resources manager for Chief Human Resources Office. And then in addition to that, we have Mary Michelle Sosney from Legislative Fiscal Office. Randy Houth is here, Chair of the Business Enterprise Consumer Committee. And I think that's everyone. Have I missed anyone? Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome. Thanks again, Max, and welcome to our guests. Let's move forward then into public comment. Is there anyone that would like to make public comment? None on a Friday? Really? All right.
Hello.
Oh, there we go, Randy.
Hey, here we go. I don't
There
want
we
to
go.
disappoint you. So
No, you didn't
Thank
disappoint
you.
at all. You're here. Take it away, Randy.
All right. Yeah. Hello, everyone. Early greetings for happy holidays coming up. And so I do want to share a couple of things. Thank you so much to Executive Director Johnson, Director Ron Stewart, and also AAG Sean Brady for attending the Blind Leadership and Superior Training Conference recently held. There was a day-long staff training some experts in the Randall Shepherd program, both legal and administrative, that were there. And I heard it was, even though I wasn't involved in that particular section, I heard it was very inspiring and good. And so I do want to send my appreciation for those attending. Also, I believe there was 5 other blind vendors that attended. And so everything seems to be going in the right direction. I know there's a lot of busy work. Ron and the agency are working on operating agreements and the RSA 15 report and the legislative report and all the administrative tasks that maybe aren't as fun as going out and creating new facilities for persons who are blind, but I guess that's what it is. There's only one thing that I would bring to the commissioner's attention. We've really been struggling with the Department of Corrections and the script and coupon pricing. They've been hamstringing the agency and the blind vendors. We haven't had an increase in product cost for 2 to 3 years, and I know Ron and Daisha have been working on that, but we're getting nowhere. So hopefully in the near future, we can get those prices increased. You all know what's happened in the last 2 or 3 years with product costs. So anyway, we just want to try and get that so we can earn more money for the blind vendors and bring in money for the set aside and just continue to go forward. So again, happy holidays early, and I'm off. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Randy. Appreciate the update. Let's move. Well, I'm assuming there's no other public comment. Guess I should leave room for that. Okay, now hearing none. Hey, Stephanie, is it possible for you to mute your
Yes.
iPhone?
Yes.
Thank you. Cool. All right. Next up is the executive director report, and Daisha, take it away.
Right. Good afternoon, commissioners. It is hard to believe that it is the final commission meeting for 2024. So I want to just first and foremost to start out by just recognizing all of you for your leadership and commitment to the agency mission and supporting exemplary services to Oregonians who are blind. I have said to all of you that the commission structure is I think very critical to us being able to make the best decisions possible on behalf of Oregonians who are blind. So thank you for your steadfast leadership to the agency during a really consequential time for us. And as we're talking about consequential stuff, I'm going to ask Kat, our CFO, to give the donations and financial reports. Take it away, Kat.
Thank you, Daisha. Good afternoon, co-chairs, commissioners, and guests. Referring first to the bequest and donation statement, our cash balance in the fund increased by $14,547 during the period under review to a total of $940,000 as of October 31st, 2024. As a cost savings measure to reduce our general fund obligation, the legislature directed the commission to use a portion of donations to match the salary expense of one transition counselor. That obligation carried forward to the 23-25 biennium, and with $43,000 of donated funds expended through October 31st towards that obligation, the unobligated donations balance after adjustment is $930,654. Referencing the financial status report next, the commission's legislatively approved budget after the February 24 short session of the legislature was $28,869,741, 67 positions and 67 full-time equivalents for use during the biennium 23-25, where $8,429,871 is general fund, $1,140,387 other fund, and 19,299,483 federal fund limitation. Based upon 16 months worth of activity as of October 31st, a variance to that legislatively approved budget is projected for the end of the biennium, with general fund fully utilized, other fund under the approved limitation by $350,000 or 37%, and federal funding exceeding our approved limitation by $1.4 million, precisely $1,396,140 or 7.2%. The total variance projected to be $1,046,426 or 3.6%, where the approved budget is once again $28,869,741, and projected expenditures now exceed $29.9 million. One of today's items, which we are bringing to you for approval to proceed, is an ask during the 25 session of the Oregon's legislature, increasing our federal funds limitation before the close of the 23-25 biennium. In addition to increases of 18% from state fiscal year 22 to 23 and another 7% from state fiscal year 23 to 24 for special payments, which are those made to and or on behalf of our participants, the financial impact of 2 rounds of equal pay adjustments initiated by the State Chief Human Resource Office over the last year has left us short of authority to spend federal funding, despite the fact that the dollars we acquired through the reallotment process means we have the cash available to use. Any questions I can answer for you at this time?
What's the other in the other funding? What's the reason for the 30% variance?
The 30% variance is similar to what happens with the federal fund limitation issue. It is set based historically on prior budget periods, and the reality of the cash that we actually bring in varies somewhat from what our limitation is set at. We never get close to it because the only other funding that we typically spend is set aside in the business enterprise program, and then with your approval, donated funds. Those are the 2 main buckets of other funding that's available to us. And we don't spend a lot of our donated funds because we try to use it for those special occasions like SWEP, for instance, when we need a little extra boost for that.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Yeah, and historically, we had third-party cooperative agreements prior to WIOA. That was a large source of our match revenue, but they become really very challenging to administer with the new regulations around pre-employment transition services. So we also had other fund limitation to cover those additional revenue sources that have been reverted back to general funds since that time. All right, other questions for Kat? She'll be back later. Thank you very much, Kat.
You're welcome. Thank you.
All right. So commissioners, it has been one of those weeks. It's been a very, very busy time. On Monday, Governor Kotek did announce and publish her budget for the 25-27 biennium. Just as a reminder, we have a 2-year budget cycle, and we are in the final leg of the 23-25 biennium that will end June 30th. And the 2025-27 biennium will start July 1st of 2025. So every 2 years, the governor provides a budget recommendation. This gets presented to the legislature, the upcoming 2025 legislative session in this case. And then ultimately, the legislature has the authority to both appropriate funding for the agency as well as set our staffing levels. So we sent you just a quick overview memo about what the governor's budget says. The document is several hundred pages, and our budget is on page 41 of that document. We provided you a link. And the governor's budget for our agency for 25-27 is at $32.4 million funds. It is a 12.3% increase from the current biennium 23-25 legislatively approved budget. Most of this increase is reflected in cost of living adjustments and price changes. We did have a few additions that are significant in terms of impact, but not necessarily significant in terms of dollar value. We had, if you will recall, we were limited in terms of what we could present in terms of an agency request budget to the maximum amount of general fund of $150,000. That was going to purchase basically the equivalent of 0.66 of a rehabilitation instructor for the blind. We are fortunate that the governor's budget includes a 0.75 of a rehabilitation instructor for the blind position. That position is permanent. And basically what that looks like, because it's a 0.75, is 6 months, it would be phased in. So 6 months into the upcoming biennium, we would have full-time position authority for the remainder of that biennium and moving forward. And we really, really are very pleased that it is not a part-time position. You as commissioners had expressed concerns about the pragmatic nature of having a 0.66 position, and the governor heard your concerns and made the appropriate response. So I appreciate your leadership on that. Our total general fund for next biennium is $9,161,859. Other funds is $1,147,421, and federal funds $22,116,930 for the total of $32,426,210. 68 positions, 67.75 full-time equivalents. And again, that 0.75 reflects that phasing in of that one additional position that would be the rehabilitation specialist, that will be a instructor for in our older blind independent living program, that would be phased in partway through the biennium. Any questions on the funding? And I just want to go over one other little element of the budget. One addition that was not in the agency request budget that is reflected in the governor's budget is we had been working for some time with the Chief Human Resource Office Classification and Compensation Division, and really trying to make sure that we were in part related to our efforts with our succession planning, with recruiting and retaining staff, that all of our positions were appropriately classified, given the size and complexity of the agency. That work is still underway, but the preliminary results suggested that there were 19 positions that were mismatched with their current classification where they should be, given the size and the complexity of the organization. That really is the several administrative positions as well as the management team. And so that work is going to be included for consideration by the 2025 legislature to reclassify those positions given their scope and duties and responsibilities relative to the size and complexity of the organization. By law, state law, the Department of Administrative Services Classification and Compensation Division has the ultimate authority on determining what the appropriate classifications are, but that all of that work has to be approved by the legislature. So once we get the final approval, then there will be the budget elements of that work and the classifications that would end up in our budget. And then that will all hopefully wrap up in the upcoming session.
Daisha, this is Scott. I'm curious, is the issue with classification for the identified positions, is it that they're generally classified too high or too low?
Too
Or is
low.
it too low?
If
Good.
you will been tracking some of our folks who have departed our agency, some of our administrative positions who have left us to go largely to the Department of Human Services, where they're doing very similar work and classified at a higher rate.
Mhm.
And so that has become an ongoing challenge that due to our succession planning efforts, we wanted that to be reviewed. And we were validated that those positions should be reclassified upward.
Good, thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions about the governor's budget? All right, hearing none, I will move on. The next item is just to provide you with a high-level federal update. As you know, by now, we all know that we are getting a new president in January of next year. And so that will turn over all of the administration, including the appointees at the Rehabilitation Services Administration, and then their agency that they report to, which is the Office of Special Education Rehabilitation Services, and they report to the director of the Department of Education. All of those positions are presidential appointees, and so they will turn over following the inauguration of the incoming president. And so we typically will have an acting commissioner that is most oftentimes the deputy commissioner, which is a career service employee. Her name is Carol Doback. She will serve in an interim role as commissioner until the Senate confirms the new Rehabilitation Services Administration commissioner. It is a lower level appointment. And so, for example, Dante Allen, who is the outgoing RSA commissioner, just got appointed last year. So it is a short period of time and a little bit hard for us because we just got underway under his leadership, and we're going to turn around and get a new commissioner at some point in the upcoming administration. So it's generally on average about 18 months into the new administration before we get an RSA commissioner. Dante Allen's appointment was a little bit later than that, but it does take a bit. And then the other element that we just wanted to make sure, there were two other things. There is some consideration happening with the reauthorization of the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. That is our federal piece of legislation that was reauthorized most recently in 2014. And so there's work happening within the current Congress that is going to be done in January for them to actually reauthorize the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. So there is current work happening within our membership organizations to work with the staff on the Hill in the policy committees to try to make sure that the public vocational rehabilitation programs' best interests are being served. The most significant impacts that we're seeing so far in the draft legislation that has been made public is they are trying to reduce, there is a state workforce board in every state required by law, and there is a intentional required representation from both private sector business and government agencies that do the policy and training work on the workforce side. And those boards tend to get fairly large. And so they're trying to figure out the right balance to reduce the size and complexity of those boards. And there's really no easy way to do that. One of the ways they thought they would reduce it is to remove the seat for Title IV, which is the title that funds the public vocational rehabilitation programs. Currently, Keith Ozels, who's the director of the general agency, represents Title IV on the board. If that amendment were to pass, then we would not have either myself or Keith represented on the board. Where that becomes problematic is one of the other potential amendments that they're looking at is a required contribution in a percentage for all of the mandated workforce partners to contribute to the infrastructure costs of the board. And let's say, for example, they would cap it at, 1.5% or 2% of a federal award. The challenge for us in those circumstances is that we do not have 1.5 or 2% of our award tied up in the value add of those workforce centers that we would be funding. We do have co-location agreements where we pay a small portion of rent that is commensurate with how much time our staff spend in the space that they occupy when they're seeing clients in the workforce centers. But it is not 1% of our total award or 1.5% of our total award. So and if we didn't have representation on the boards, it's kind of like taxation without representation. I don't know how else to say it, where we wouldn't have a say on how those infrastructure costs were being invested, and we wouldn't have that particular seat on the board. So the third thing that they're looking at is that they are considering they're fairly complex reporting and tracking and performance measures that are required by all workforce partners in the current piece of legislation that really just have gotten fully implemented in the last several years. They are considering new measures and with a look back where they would be actually capturing kind of performance data. So we would be going back and doing some retroactive data pulls to add to the data of the performance of the system. And that's just really challenging for us as a system to be able to do that. So those are the kind of pieces that are happening now that would affect us. There is not any current amendments that would actually open up specifically Title IV. It's just in the common sections of WIOA. Any questions about that particular element? And then the third element of the federal update is we are still under what's called a continuing resolution, which funds the federal government. That continuing resolution is set to expire on the 20th of December. So in a couple weeks from now. And what we are hearing is that they are anticipating passing another by the 20th. They're expected to pass another continuing resolution that will fund the government through sometime probably in the spring, likely around March. So the challenge with that is it's challenging to forecast your financial revenue when you get it piecemealed like that. And we also want to make sure that we get that cost of living adjustment that we really need in order to be able to continue to fund the increases in just how much things cost with inflation. And those are anything else on the federal side? Any questions about any of that? There's really only been one time where the government closed for any, extended period of time, and that was in, I think, like 1994. And that did not go over well. And so I'm not anticipating any problems with them passing either a budget if they get around to it for the remainder of the federal fiscal year, or if they have to, a continuing resolution, because that is typical practice. All right. And then the next thing I just wanted to alert you to is, we've probably talked about this the last couple of meetings. We are getting a federal compliance audit for the state fiscal year 2024. We were anticipating this. The general agency in the previous year had material findings, which kicks off an automatic audit in the subsequent year. We did have two minor findings that have already been resolved. But I honestly have always looked at the federal compliance audits as a nice wellness check. It's a nice opportunity to have independent, at no cost to us other than staff time, eyes on various compliance factors within the program and this is specifically for the vocational rehabilitation program, which is obviously by far our largest grant. So we've already had our entrance conference and our engagement letter, and we anticipate that the field work will be in January and February. And so likely we would have those results for you at your April of 2025 meeting. Any questions about that? All right, and then my final item, Mr. Chair, is just a reminder, we will be going into the 2025 legislative sessions starting in January of next year. And this is in the odd years, the legislature will enter in a session for 180 days. And this is what we call the long session. And this is where the majority of the legislature does their work. And they will do a combination of obviously policy bills, but the big impact for agencies like ours is that we will go in front of the Ways and Means Appropriation Committee, which does ultimately, since they have final authority, set our funding levels and staffing levels for the upcoming biennium, which will start in July. Any questions about that? And it will be here before we know it. Time is always going by quickly.
That is for sure. Any questions, commissioners?
All right, Mr. Chair, that concludes my report.
Thank you, Daisha. Let's move into old business, business enterprise program update. Ron, take it away.
Good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, speaking of time going by quickly, one thing I'm kind of proud to say is that in 8 days will be my 1-year anniversary with the commission as the business enterprise program director. It's been awesome, and it's going to continue to be awesome. Let's see. I'd like to report that we have one new licensee that just passed the licensing test, and so his name is Kavika. So we're busy at work trying to create opportunity and a facility for Kavika. It's done putting together a brand new facility in the Portland area, which will go out to bid probably late December, early January. So that's exciting. We've been working hard on that. Another thing to report is our food cart program is moving right along. Actually, we picked up 2 food carts today. It's our first 2 that were built for us, and we actually picked them up today and brought them to Salem. And so we're excited to deploy those, put them out to bid, and create that revenue stream for the program. So we're long time coming, a lot of planning going into it. Really excited about that. Yeah. Does anyone have any questions?
Well, not a question, but Ron, congrats on 8 days from 1 year. That's wonderful. And you've been a great addition to the Oregon Commission for the Blind and the Business Enterprise Program. And I know Randy seems so much happier, which always makes me happy. But also congrats on getting the 2 food carts going. And I mean, within a year, that's progress. It's progress I think all of us commissioners are proud of. So keep up that great work.
I do have a question.
Go for it, Stephanie.
Thank you so much.
Are there any locations in Southern Oregon, or will there be some in Southern Oregon?
In Southern Oregon, we are looking at the Eugene area. We're trying to identify locations there pretty aggressively. We'd really like to get some opportunities going there.
What about the Medford area?
In the Medford area, I don't have anything to speak of right now, but we're happy to explore anything that might be down there.
Are there opportunities for that we're just not aware of?
There could be, yeah.
Okay. Okay.
I think so. I would have to look more into that.
Yeah, Stephanie, this is Daisha. I'll chime in. Historically, we have not had as much success in the smaller populous areas of the state, because you really rely on two things for a live operations. We have quite a bit of vending down there, but for live operations, you need a combination of public building employees in a particular concentration area, as well as foot traffic of visitors. So,
but there's the Medford bus station. That's a perfect location.
yeah, and that's a perfect suggestion. I think that's the piece that we've traditionally been able to rely on is as the population shifts in these smaller communities where we traditionally may have not thought that there were opportunities available, we could certainly look into the bus station down there. That's a great suggestion.
Yeah, there's there's a lot of traffic and there's no coffee shops or anything nearby. So,
oh, that's great.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Are there any other questions?
Doesn't sound like it, Ron. Good work.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Moving into new business, we got a couple things on the agenda here. We'll start out with the overview of the caseload and expenditure trends for client services.
All right, that will start with me. Good afternoon, commissioners. This is Angel, the Director of Vocational Rehabilitation. And I just want to kind of give some context. As you might imagine, things have been shifting as it relates to the case management case services all around the nation, and we are not exempt from the experiences that have been happening since COVID. So one of the things we thought would be helpful is just to give you a sense about how those numbers have been shifting as it relates to the vocational rehabilitation program within OCB. So I think you know that we operate within federal fiscal years generally as program. And so we're talking about federal fiscal, which is October 1 through September 30th of each of these years. So the first one we'll overview is the FFY 2022, which in VR, we served 649 people in that year. And then we had 16 individuals in that pre-employment transition potentially eligible role. That was it's new under the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. So that's something we've been trying to attend to more and more. So it's a fairly low number, still part of vocational rehabilitation, but a subset. And then in 2023, we had 683 folks that we served in general VR and 28 people that we, just youth or students that we served in potentially eligible pre-ETS, pre-employment transition services. In 2024, FFY 2024, we had 764 clients that we served. So that was a pretty significant jump for us in VR, and 34 students that we served in the pre-ETS potentially eligible bucket. So those are pretty good numbers to indicate to you that that's when Kat was referring to our expenditures going up. Not only are we serving more clients, which has a direct correlation to expenditure, but our clients' needs are changing. There's more significant need for advanced technology. Technology expenses, I think, as we all know, are going up. So we have several buckets that Kat's going to walk through more of the details, our numbers person here. But I wanted to kind of give you a sense of not only those numbers, but the kinds of buckets that services are happening more significantly as we've moved through the last few years. So some of those categories that might be of interest are, let's see, diagnosis and treatment of impairments. So you might imagine medical treatments and things that we're helping clients to invest in that don't have medical coverage or that have medical coverage that can't help with certain areas that need attention before someone actually can be employable. Job placement assistance, so job developers is a significant part of the work where we're doing a lot of work with clients who are really struggling. A lot of them have co-occurring disabilities outside of blindness, mental health, a lot of things that really require some significant work on with clients alongside our clients to get them ready for and then into a work placement. It might be a work experience, which still then requires additional job development. So those kinds of services are significant in getting placements, but can take a long time. And then, of course, vocational and occupational training that leads to certifications and ultimately employability. So that is another bucket that's been growing significantly for us. And rehab engineering that Kat and I were just going back and forth going, why do they call it that? That's a weird category to call it. It's actually just rehab tech. So it's computers and the things that go alongside computers like refreshable braille displays and scripting, that things that cost a significant amount of money have also, as you might imagine, gone up over time. So those are kind of the big buckets that that we're identifying that have impacted our spending as alongside those numbers of our caseloads. Before I hand it over to Kat to get into the nitty-gritty of the numbers, are there any questions for me? And I can be available with Kat at the end of our time too. All right, I'm hearing silence. So Kat, take it away.
This information was presented in the financial summary, but just to give you a little bit more context around the 4 buckets of primary expenditures that we allocate funding towards every biennium. They are personal services, which encompasses wages and benefits that we pay on behalf of our employees. Services and supplies, which are agency-specific services and supplies, so the rents, the utility bills, the cost of paper, and those kind of things. Capital outlay, which is just what it sounds like. It's capital equipment that costs in excess of $5,000 and is expected to be usable for more than 1 year. And then special payments, which is the category Angel was just giving you some information around. In those 4 budget buckets, as I like to think of them, from state fiscal year 22 to state fiscal year 23, there was an 18% increase. And from state fiscal year 23 to state fiscal year 24, it was a 7% increase. And it's moving up pretty rapidly in terms of the dollars as well. So if anybody has any specific questions they would like to ask about where are we seeing the largest increases, what are the dollar figures, I'm happy to share those. I'm also happy to distribute the information in a format where you can perhaps digest it in black and white or using JAWS in a different manner. That's a lot of numbers, I know.
I'll just speak for myself, Scott. I would love a summary.
Okay. A verbal one or a written one?
Well, written would be fine. I'd love to read it. Just that helps me. That's a lot of numbers.
It is a lot of numbers. Tell you what I'll do. I will send you my workbook if you have any level of comfort with Excel, and I'll tell you which tabs to focus on. Don't look at all of them because your eyes will cross. If you look at, in fact, I'll hide the ones I don't want you to worry about. You, of course, can unhide them and look at them. It's not any kind of secret. But you can focus on the first couple that actually rolls it up at a very high level and then breaks it down a little bit more so into some of the buckets that are of interest around client services in particular.
Cool. That's good. Thank you.
Okay. I'll send that along later.
I'd like that as well, please, Kat.
Of course.
It might just make sense to send it out to the commission, and the commissioners can choose to peruse it or not.
Of course, I will send it to Max and he can forward it along. And of course, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach back out and let me know.
Thanks, Kat. Any other questions or comments for Kat or Angel? Okay, thank you, Kat and Angel. We will move forward on our agenda here. The next item is the legislative request for 2025. This is an action item. Daisha is going to explain what this is all about, and then we'll be looking for a motion to either move forward with this or not in some way. So let's take it away, Daisha.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioners, you will recall during October meeting that we anticipated that Kat had seen the rising costs and anticipated that we would need to go to the legislature to make some budget adjustments to get us through the remainder of the 23-25 biennium. And so we have been working on our analysis, and that analysis was somewhat interrelated with what our current, what the governor's budget would look like for next biennium. And so we've done a lot of numbers crunching in the last few days. And so what we have for you today is what we're projecting is what we would need an additional federal fund limitation. And that is basically we have the federal funds in the bank, we have the federal awards, and we just need permission from the legislature who controls our spending levels to be able to say that you can spend additional federal dollars for the remainder of this biennium. That's a relatively straightforward ask. The other element is a general fund request, and a general fund request is state funding. And so the state funding that, and Kat will talk through the numbers with you, is going to cover, as we talked about, is an administrative position that would be an expansion of our human services assistant team that would primarily serve as a driver. The temporary rules make a driver for a permanent employee just really challenging to work with. And so we need a permanent position for a driver that when they're not driving, they can also support administrative duties to make that sure that it's an efficient use of time and resources. The other elements is a perennial budget issue that we have been addressing a little piece at a time, which is we have employees that work on the administrative side that are budgeted with federal funds, but in our the way we have an approved indirect cost rate of the programs and how we charge the grants, they're actually funded with state money. So there's a gap between how they're funded and how they're budgeted. So we're asking for additional, and I think it's 5 positions, Kat, that we would be asking to, there's 4 positions to fix the how the positions are budgeted, which would revert them from federal funds that we actually don't use for the positions back to general fund. And then the other element that Kat also mentioned in the financial report is there was a state law that was passed in 2019 that basically makes sure that individuals in the state of Oregon, even private sector employers, are paying people at the appropriate level based on their skills and qualifications and experience. And that has resulted in a process that happens periodically where individual, their skills and qualifications are evaluated based on other similar people in those positions around the state. And it's called pay equity. We've had 2 major impacts to that, which have had a significant budget impact to our agency that we would be requesting funding for as well. And I want to pause there and make sure, Kat, did I miss a bucket?
Nope, I think you got them all.
And here's where typically we would have an exact amount of that general fund. What we would be asking for this time is that we will provide you with a federal fund limitation amount that has had its full analysis. The general fund is more of a conversation because our request would go through both the chief financial office, which is the governor's budgeting site, as well as the Legislative Fiscal Office, which is the legislature's budgeting side. So we would ask today that you approve if you are accepting this strategy, and not to exceed amount that encompasses all of the asks that could be considered, recognizing that either the Chief Financial Office and or the Legislative Fiscal Office may reduce that ask down based on the availability of general fund or a policy decision for the agency. I'm going to stop rambling and let Kat just go over the numbers with you, and then we can respond to any questions you may have.
Okay, thank you, Daisha. As with the information on where the money has been going, there is detail behind all of this. I'm going to keep it pretty high level at this point. If you're interested in seeing my analysis, I'm happy to share that with you after the meeting in Excel. The first issue that we tried to tackle was the federal fund limitation. I knew about 4 months ago, particularly if we didn't get reallotment, we were going to have a problem, but we were fortunate enough to receive some of the reallotment dollars that were relinquished by other states, other state agencies. So that addressed the pressure on cash for us, but the limitation issue had to be addressed as well. At an average drawdown rate of $845,000 a month for the first 16 months of the biennium, I calculated that we would need an additional amount of $1,770,806 to operate with to get us by until the end of the biennium. The next thing I did was then look at, with reallotment considered, how much cash I was projecting would be available to us, making some assumptions around what the 25 awards were going to be. As Daisha mentioned, we're under a continuing resolution, so I don't know for certain what our cost of living escalation increases will be from the 24 to the 25 awards. But I use the president's proposal, and we'll see that may be a little generous, but I also left us some cushion in projecting that the amount of cash available to us through the end of the federal fiscal year exceeds that $1.7 million. And we would need $7,400,000 to get through June 30th, leaving us another $609,000 in cushion in case my projections are off by somewhat, or if they're spot on or they're overly aggressive. That $609,000 then just becomes available to us use the first quarter of the next state fiscal year, which is the final quarter of federal fiscal year 25. So the federal fund limitation increase will not exceed $1.77 million. It may be less than that, and I need to explain why it could be less than that. And that has to do with the other items that we would like to go before the legislature with your approval to ask for, which is the cost of a driver. We've had a driver on staff as a temporary since October 1st, so our intention is to go in and ask for the full cost from October 1st to the end of the biennium, with a request also to roll that into the next biennium budget. The accounting indirects that Daisha mentioned, which are primarily budgeted using federal funding, and we cannot use very much federal funding to actually pay those folks. It's 4 positions on the accounting team, excluding myself, which is the accounting technician, the payroll analyst, and the accountant 1 and 3. And then the second round of equal pay adjustments, we were able to absorb the first round of equal pay adjustments, but the second round just rolled out, and it was a pretty significant hit. The timing was good, however, because I was able to incorporate it into my calculations. The result of those 3 items is we would be requesting an amount in general fund, which will not exceed $928,428. And because we're shifting funds off of federal as part of that general fund ask, federal funding would actually go down by $738,850. The net increase to our overall budget for 23-25 would be $189,578, bringing us to a total legislatively approved budget to get us through to June 30th of $29,059,319. I'm going to stop for just a second and give you a chance to ask any questions, because I did just roll out a lot of numbers with a lot of dollar signs associated with them. Makes my eyes cross sometimes. Don't worry.
And now you know what we've been doing the last week. Just our eyes have been crossing over a little bit.
And so just to clarify, we're looking for a motion to increase the federal limitation to 1.77 million and to request a not to exceed amount of $928,428. Hope I got that right.
You did.
From the for the general fund from the legislature.
That's correct.
Okay. So if you have questions about that, please ask them now, but that's the motion we'll be looking for. And hearing no questions, would someone just like to make a motion about that then?
I'll make a motion.
Is the motion to increase the federal limitation to 1.77 million and request not to exceed amount of $928,428 from the legislature?
Yeah.
Okay. And is there a second for that?
This
This
is
is
Cassie.
Nadira, second.
I think I heard both. I heard Cassie and Nadira second. Cassie, I heard you first, so we'll go with you. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, motion carries. 1 second.
Thank you very
I'm
much.
gonna just go on mute here and I'll be right back. So
We should have canned elevator music for such a moment.
I'm so sorry, everybody. The truth is my car has been getting fixed for like the last 9 months and it just arrived. So they're exchanging the replacement car and I wasn't expecting that. So sorry about that. Okay. Let's move forward then on our agenda to the 2024 risk assessment.
Okay, that is me. This is Clay France. I am the agency's internal auditor. And good afternoon, commissioners. It's a pleasure to be here. And I will be spending just a couple of minutes talking about the 2024 risk assessment. Some of you may recall that we do this annually and report back to you the results. And we have been doing it for the last 4 years. So I'll talk a little bit about what risk assessment is, just a high-level overview, why we do it, the process we use to do it, and the results that we found, and then next steps. Feel free to jump in at any time, interrupt me with questions. I welcome your questions or comments. You may recall that OCB's strategic plan identifies 6 program objectives, and they all talk to how the agency helps Oregonians who are blind. So a risk to the agency is anything that could prevent us from achieving those objectives. So a risk is the possibility that an event will occur that will impact the agency's ability to achieve the objectives. And then a risk assessment is just a systematic approach to evaluating these risks and the agency's ability to achieve, or the potential impact to the agency, sorry. So strong, healthy organizations effectively manage their risk, and organizations typically follow 4 steps in doing so. The first being identifying the risks, and that's what we have been working on most recently, evaluating those risks and any compensating controls that might be in place or mitigating factors. And then reviewing the effectiveness of the internal control environment or the internal controls that are addressing those risks, and then implementing strategies to achieve an acceptable level of risk for the agency, whether by implementing additional internal controls or putting in other mitigating factors. So this year, the process we followed in doing this risk assessment, each member of the leadership team reviewed the list of risks that came from 2023. They reviewed the risks for their particular areas, and then the leadership team met as a group and had an in-depth discussion on these risks, modifying some of the rankings, because the risk rankings can change over time depending on how the controls are being implemented. We deleted some risks that are no longer applicable, modified others, and we identified the top 10, what we believe to be the top 10 risks, and have included those in the report to you, commissioners. We keep an extensive log of all the risks we've identified facing the agency, and it's currently at 84 risks. And we rank each of those risks. So 5 of them are ranked as high, 76 are medium, and 3 are low. And I think it's important to recognize that these are inherent risks. So that means they're risks that events would pose if no controls or mitigating factors are in place. So just because we're identifying these risks by no means mean that they have occurred at OCB. We're just identifying the inherent risks and then asking ourselves, do we have sufficient controls in place to address this risk, or might we need to enhance those controls? So as I mentioned, the top 10 are included in the report we provided to you. They're fairly evenly spread across the programs at OCB. Vocational rehabilitation has the most at 4 of the risks. Independent living has 2, the operations function has 2 risks, and then BE and finance each have 1 risk. In the report we provided to you, it lists the ranking of each of the top 10 risks. And you may notice that 5 of them, of the 10, are identified as high risk, and the other 5 are medium risk. And we also included an action plan for each, and we feel that the action plans as we have them adequately address the risk at this time. And it's a combination of approaches in these action plans. So typically it's the program area closely monitoring the risk, and then also asking themselves, do we need to enhance internal controls or add additional internal controls to address the risk? But also, as I work with the leadership team now to create the internal audit plan for next year, for actually the next several years, we will definitely use the information from this risk assessment to feed into the internal audit plan, and we'll most likely perform several audits in areas associated with these risks. So what's next? We kind of just talked about it. This is a living document. We update it at least annually, more often if necessary throughout the year. And then, as I mentioned, management continues to monitor each of these risks. We're considering including some in the internal audit plan, and I will present that internal audit plan to you at your next meeting. So that's a short, sweet overview of risk assessment. I'm more than happy to answer any questions about the process or the particular risks.
We love short and sweet, Clay. Commissioners, any questions? Commissioners love short and sweet on Fridays, especially. So, so it sounds like everything's good there. Thank you, Clay.
Great. Thank you.
And Angel, I'm guessing you're coming next. We got SWEP 2025.
That would be me.
Right.
All right. I was just thinking I should share a quick story about a SWEP student who I just heard from this morning that you mentioned earlier, Scott, who was back in SWEP many, many years ago, has finished her master's degree in mental health, and it just contacted me this morning to say that she's ready to become a vendor for us as a mental health counselor. So it's just watching how our students evolve as we're talking about SWEP is just an incredible thing to be a part of. So that said, we're talking about 2025 SWEP, and there are some great things happening. We're in the process of rolling out our application because we've been looking at switching some things up around SWEP and sort of modernizing our look and feel. And we are still very much in that process. However, I will mention that Portland SWEP is now we're calling it Emerge Time, doing some rebranding. We're just using that language right now and people are getting used to it. But that is something we wanted to do also just because, sometime maybe it's not going to be in Portland. It could be anywhere in the state or around the state of Oregon. So we just wanted to give a better sense about what that program really is by giving it a title. Indicating that it is really what we consider to be a leadership program for students as they're learning to work and thrive. That program is going to be running next summer at Portland State University. We were kind of looking around to see if there might be some other locations to consider, but it looks like Portland State is still going to be where we're going to be planted, and we do love Portland State. We just wish there was air conditioning in more of their locations. I know they're working on it, but they just have some older infrastructure. But we don't know our numbers yet. That's going to be coming once we get applications out and get those worked through. So hopefully by the April board meeting, we'll have some more information about like actual numbers. The big news is that our Salem-based program and our community-based programs are now going to be combined and managed by the two counselors who had been managing those, coordinating those programs. That we're calling a foundation SWEP now because it is our foundational aspect of growing and learning and getting familiar with the whole world of work. We're building up the menu for what foundational SWEP is going to look like. But some exciting breaking news, and I want to thank Chair Scott McCallum for the partnership with him and with Washington Blind, because we are going to be offering as part of that package of foundational SWEP an opportunity to join with the Yes One program in Washington. So our students from both programs will be able to be on the Washington School for the Blind campus together for 2 weeks of programming that are all about pre-employment transition services. They're all gearing students up, getting them ready for the world of work. We are going to, where possible and where it makes sense, be looking for community-based opportunities. Students do not have to go to a residential aspect in order to participate in foundational SWEP. We just want that to be an offering. It is the last 2 weeks of July. So it could interfere with like the continuity of a whole community-based work experience. So some students may really just want to focus on being in their location, wherever they are in the state of Oregon, and just doing that community-based work experience. But we're going to encourage students that are interested in meeting other students, learning alongside them, and getting these foundational skills to consider this residential aspect for the foundational SWEP. And we're really excited about this. It's going to be more students getting to meet each other because the program in Washington, just based on the numbers of the population, are bigger. So, we traditionally have, anywhere between like 8 and 12 in what used to be Salem SWEP, now foundational SWEP. And then we had people in the community-based work experiences, similar numbers last year. But this year, we really are hoping to join with Washington, and they're generally somewhere around, I think they said around 18, right, Scott?
Yep.
Yeah, around
18 to 20 is what
18
they
to 20.
shoot for. Yeah.
Yeah, so if we make up another, 10 students, that's, 20 more students that the students in Oregon will get to collaborate with, learn alongside, and do, the recreational activities and all of the cool things that come with getting to be a part of that Yes One and foundational SWEP programming. That's kind of the big news on the SWEP front. And if there are any questions, I'd sure be happy to answer them, but it is in evolution right now.
I have a question, Angel.
Yeah, Stephanie.
So, NFB, so I was just elected the affiliate president for Oregon.
Yay.
And so we have scholarships. They will start opening up March to June for applications. Are these kids being told about that so they can get some money for schooling?
We're always, yes, that is very much on our radar. But if there's anything in particular that you would like to send to me, Stephanie, to make sure that I'm aware of communications, the NFB is always part of what our transition counselors are talking to students about.
So they are knowing that, because I would like to somehow bridge that connection with being the new president is as getting, them involved. Because so we talked about so 2024. So Alex, I can't remember his last name right now. He just got a scholarship from that. I would just like to, if we can get together, that'd be great to build that connection so that they can get it, get to know about NFB and get involved. And that would also include the people in Washington, because we have a state.
Absolutely. Stephanie, please feel free to reach out. I'm happy to talk with you and push out any communications too that you might have that would be helpful for our transition team. So absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Any other questions?
This is Scott. Just a quick comment. We are also really excited up in Washington to partner with Oregon on this. I'm excited to have just more kids getting together because there's a lot of energy with these young people. In case anyone is wondering, Angel mentioned that Washington calls their program YES, and you've heard that Oregon calls their program SWEP. YES stands for Youth Employment Solutions, and I think it's actually probably modeled after SWEP, which is Summer Work Experience Program. So they're very similar, and Washington, like Oregon, has sort of two steps. And I love this language change that you're using with foundations and emerging leaders. And I wonder if there's ever an opportunity to connect with AFB, because they have their own sort of blind leadership program. And you don't have to maybe reinvent the wheel all the time, but so they might have some good stuff to add.
I know we are using some of the AFB materials, but that's a great point. I will keep that on the forefront of my mind. And if there's anything that you hear about that wouldn't naturally be coming in front of us, I'd love to have that sent to us, and I can make sure it gets to our people that are working with students.
Yeah, and then I'd also like to invite the commissioners over the summer. I will not be on the board at that point, but I will be here working, and we will hopefully be having both of these student groups from both states, and I would encourage you to come up, visit me. I would love to see you, give you a tour of the Washington State School for the Blind campus, but then you can see these programs too.
Oh, love that. Thank you so much for your partnership, Scott. I really appreciate it.
So where's the school located in Washington?
It's in Vancouver, so it's honestly like a stone's throw from where the commission is. We're right, just barely north of the Columbia River.
Right, thank you.
Yeah, Stephanie, if you ever are up this way, honestly, anybody, if you're ever up this way, please stop on by. I'll give you a nice tour, I promise.
I'd love to take you up on that. I live in Vancouver.
Wonderful. Anytime you want, Kat.
Thank you.
But this meeting's not about me, so is there anything else about SWEP?
Yeah, any other questions? All right. Well, I'll be excited to share more as things evolve, and appreciate your support as ever, commissioners.
Thank you, Angel. All right, next up, we are moving into executive session. So executive session called pursuant to ORS 192.6602I. Did someone say something? All right, executive session called pursuant to ORS 192.6602I to review and evaluate the employment-related performance of our wonderful executive director, So we will go into executive session now. Well,
So the regular meeting is in session.
all right. Welcome back to the regular session. We still have then an action item on this. I'm looking for a motion as it relates to the executive director performance review, the 360 performance review, and we have the report and we can adopt the results. And so I'm looking for a motion in that regard.
I motion that we adopt it.
Thank you, Stephanie. Do I have a second?
Can second that.
Dr.
Sorry.
Labram with a quick second, beat you to it, Lillian. And then this is your time to everybody gets to exercise their voice. Please say aye if you then want to support the motion to adopt the results.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, saw that. Indicate aye if you do not want the, or nay, I should say, if you do not want to adopt the results. Okay, hearing none, the motion carries. We are going to adopt the results of the 360 performance review for Daisha. And Daisha, on behalf of the whole commission, I would like to pursue a request to recognize your strong performance. We would like to recognize you with 40 hours of performance leave that we have learned that is a possibility. And so Sherry is going to take that direction and run with it. And we hope that you are rewarded for your extraordinary performance and your wonderful leadership as the executive director of the Oregon Commission for the Blind. So thank you.
Thank you so much. That's very, very kind and thoughtful. I appreciate it. You know how much I love my job, so.
Yeah, I know it's going to be hard to get you to take that leave if you're provided that leave, but you need to take it because work-life balance is important and we need you for years ahead. Well, I guess on that note, we are at the end of our meeting here. Commissioners, any last things you want to say before we adjourn? Hearing none, I want to say thank you. Happy Friday to everybody. Happy holidays to everyone. I hope you have a wonderful weekend.